Live. Yay! It is your Sunday. It's 3 minutes to the hour. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. If you are joining us kind of immediately, that means that you've got the notifications turned on and you are a subscriber to the YouTube channel. Thank you so much indeed for that. Or indeed, you've got the notifications on Twitter as well, because of course we are broadcasting to YouTube, Periscope and Twitter, to Facebook, and also to Twitch as well. We have a couple of people who have jumped in already. Excellent stuff. Welcome along. We have got some great guests. As always, all the support that we receive for the channel is very much appreciated. It really does allow us to keep doing what we do, such as paying for the StreamYard service, paying for our hosting, just generally keeping the lights on for an Englishman in San Diego and the Convention Collective. So thank you so much indeed for all of your support. I know that the Patreon payout is going to be going into our accounts this week. So thank you very much indeed for that. That's going to be very helpful for a couple of hosting things. Also, you can support while you're watching the show. If you're watching on Periscope, you can use Super Hearts. If you pay a small kind of fee, and you can just hit the hearts and just kind of show your support for the Periscope channel. Likewise on Twitch as well. Any donations that come through, we'll gladly take them off your hands and say thank you very much indeed. We've got Toby Tolino who's joining us. Morning, Leonard. I am going to say my good mornings and good afternoons and all of that, and also my say my salutations to our American brethren. We'll do that when we come on air, because I want to wish you all the best for the holidays and for this weekend. As always, we have ourselves the chat rooms open on YouTube and all of the streaming services. So by all means, any comments, any questions that you want to put in, anything that you've spotted in the world of comics and Comic-Con that you want to kind of discuss, jump in on the chat box, leave a message. We'll cover them all, and we'll do what we can to get into all of the bits and pieces over the course of the next hour. And of course, any questions that you have for Christine Valada, please do put them down. And any questions from Mark a little bit later, because we have had Kevin Smith gracing our aisle here in the UK over the last couple of days. Wish it could have been a little bit drier and warmer for him, but no, that's the time of year for you. So he's been here promoting Jay and Silent Bob reboot. Mark Serby's been speaking to Kevin Smith, and also been checking out his appearances here in the UK. So he's going to be coming on to talk about that a little bit later. All of the comments, we'll do our best to get through them all. So please do jump in with anything that you want to get into. And yeah, we'll cover as much as we can over the course of the next hour. Hope you've got your cup of tea ready, because we're about to jump in with this week's episode of Talkin Con. This is where I need theme music. You know what I mean? I need a decent dramatic theme or something. Not as dramatic as Empire magazine, which quite frankly scares the cack out of me, but you get the idea. Right, so there we go. That is our intro, and just welcoming everybody along. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's your Sunday morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, for joining us here on Talkin Con, a cup of tea with Englishman in San Diego. My name is Leonard Sultana, and each and every week at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT, we talk Comic-Cons, con culture, all the things that appear at such events, so all the stuff and nonsense that you find at Comic-Cons. We get into all of that over the course of the next hour. We usually do our best to cover as much as you want to cover as well. So please do jump in on all the comments. It's great to see as many people are joining us nice and early already. Like I say, Toby's joining us. Good morning, Leonard. Hello there. We've got Into the Blue Mister joining us from the UK. Hello there, evening all. I know that he's also very happy because he got himself his prize delivery finally through. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope you enjoyed the bonus prezi that I threw in the envelope as well. Andrew English is joining us. Hello from London. It's great to see as many people joining us on the chat room already. Listen, I think I just want to dive straight into this and welcome our guest, because I'm looking forward to talking to her. It's somebody who I met at, well, certainly for the first time at San Diego Comic-Con a year and a half ago. And yeah, it's just a pleasure to have her joining us. We have Christine Valada joining us. Hello, Christine. How are you?
Hi, Leonard. I'm going to correct you on that. It's a
Go for
Valada.
it. Valada. Now, I knew that
Valada
it was going to be numerous ways I could go.
That's true. But, you know, you were close, but no cigar, as we say over here.
Fair enough. Excellent stuff. Well, listen, like I say, I mean, the first time I met you about a year and a half ago, and it was at the tribute panel at San Diego Comic-Con for Len Wein. And it was such a positive and affirming and really enjoyable session talking about memories that you all had of Len. And it really was an honor to be there. So thank you very much indeed for, number one, letting me put the audio of that up online. And also, it was just a pleasure to be in the room with yourself for that.
I'll have to find it to listen to one of these.
No, it was such a fun session. Also, first and foremost as well, happy Thanksgiving. Hope you've had a good weekend. Hope you've had a good weekend.
We had 15 people for dinner on Thursday.
That would do it.
Yeah, it was busy.
That's the way Thanksgiving should be, I think.
Yeah. Len did what he called Orphans Thanksgiving. He wanted to make sure that none of his friends were without a place to go on Thanksgiving. So we always had a crowd.
That's
and
fantastic.
We still have a crowd. So.
Excellent stuff. Cool. Right. So, like I say, we want to talk about not only Len's experience at Comic-Cons, but also your own as well, because I mean, I know that you're a photographer. You've also been in the law profession as well, legal profession as well. But what was your first experiences of going to Comic-Cons then? Was it through? Well, yeah, you just go into that really. I mean, what was your first experience of going to cons?
Well, my first experience going to conventions weren't comic conventions; they were science fiction conventions. And the first one I remember trying to go to was a Lunacon in New York, and it was very confusing. We couldn't get in. And then there were two Star Trek conventions in New York, the second and third of the Star Trek conventions in New York that I did go to. I met David Gerald there, and one day David Gerald introduced me to Len. But I went to the local science fiction convention in the Washington, D.C. area where I lived for 15 years, which was called Disclave when I went there. And I did go to 2 World Cons during that. Well, actually, I went to a number of them before I met Len. And I met Len because I came out to California to photograph Harlan Ellison at WesterCon in 1989. And I was wandering down a hallway, and David, who I had seen earlier in the weekend, was talking to somebody and said, this is somebody you should photograph for your project. And that is how I met my one day to be husband. My first Comic-Con was we were married in 1991. So it was 1992. And I haven't missed one since. That was the carve out in our calendar, nothing interfered with.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what you find with a number of comic professionals, that once they start going to San Diego, and once they go to like New York or one of the big ones, it's usually a big convention each year. There is something that kind of grabs their attention, and certainly with San Diego, that is one of those those pins in the calendar, which isn't going to go anywhere anytime soon.
Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
It's a great city to visit for 5 days. You know, it's a terrific place to go visit.
Well, I think that's the reason why myself and the missus try and take it for 3 weeks. Week before, week after. We enjoy San Diego a lot. It's a gorgeous city. When it came to those first initial conventions that you were going to, I mean, before you met Len as well, like say, Star Trek is a very rarefied convention experience. It's very I mean the ones I've been to, very intense. Still a lot of fun, but very intense. I mean, what was your first impression of going into a convention?
Okay. For me, a girlfriend of mine from college had gone to the first one the year before. And I don't...
Strength in numbers.
Yeah. And it wasn't terribly large. The one I went to was, I want to say it was twice the size. So it was hovering around 1,500 people at that point in a hotel that didn't have a big ballroom. People were kind of crammed in when guests like Isaac Asimov were speaking. And then the following year, it exploded. It was somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 people, not particularly intimate. What I recall is that, unlike the breakout panels that you have at conventions now, where there are multiple tracks of programming, there was one place where programs went on, and that was the ballroom. And you didn't have any, unlike these days at San Diego, you didn't have any trouble getting in, but it was a large room. And people would come in and they would talk, not the kind of panel discussions and stuff that people who were featured. There were, I can't remember where there were art shows. There were certainly dealers' rooms. When I started going to the science fiction conventions, the art shows were of great interest to me because I did start buying art at them. And and then I would go to panels that about books that I liked or whatever. I'm much more at that point literarily focused than I was media focused, except for Trek. So there wasn't a lot of other media in those early days. I mean, I'm talking, those Trek conventions are pre-Star Wars. Yeah. So
I am going to be sharing this evening because somebody found themselves a Swamp Thing issue. It was either Swamp Thing or Howard the Duck. It was a comic where there was a Stan Lee soapbox in the back, and he was talking about, I've just been to my first show. It's called San Diego Comic Convention. And he's displaying all the names that he's meeting there and all the people that he's been up on the panel with. And at the end he goes, yes, and Chuck Norris was also there doing a kung fu demonstration. I'm going, damn Hollywood taking over San Diego Comic-Con. Good grief. People say this and they talk about Hollywood taking over. Hollywood's always been there. It's always been part of the convention experience at San Diego. Go ahead.
Len had this wonderful story that he would tell about being, in sort of a confined space, and three fans were busily discussing, this is at Comic-Con, busily discussing his career. And he's looking around going, I should be discussing their career, because it was Mark Hamill and Bill Mumy and Miguel Ferrer. And
that is one of my favorite Comic-Con history photos.
Yeah.
Those three. I mean, when it comes to fanboys, you don't get bigger than those three. That was, oh yeah, absolutely. When it comes to those shows that you went to back then and how the shows have evolved, and you mentioned there about how the convention kind of had a breakthrough and it kind of an explosion. It does seem whenever you speak to people about convention, not just San Diego either, that there seems to be this constant ramp up, this constant evolution. When and if did it feel that it was ever too much for you? Did it ever feel that, hang on a second, this is just way too big?
Yeah. I think it was around the year that the Spielberg, not Spielberg, but the DreamWorks version of The Time Machine came out, because I think that attendance doubled in that year, and it got much, it got geometrically greater after that. But that was the year we really felt it. That you could no longer, you're starting to feel you couldn't no longer get in panels. I think the year that Big Bang Theory had its first panel and I couldn't get in the door, it's like going, I'm going to find something else to do during the weekend, because I can't stand in line for 4 hours to get into a panel. I mean, I'm too old and too rich to do that. I mean, it's not too rich, but you know what I mean. It's just like there are other things to do in life than to stand in line for now 18 hours, sleep overnight outside. I gave up camping a long time ago.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So Yeah.
When myself and the other half go to San Diego, and this is a running joke for us, that we land in San Diego, we get to the hotel, we pack, we get to the convention center, and then we just part ways and don't see each other for either the day or if possibly the entire convention until we kind of come back together
If she likes
on
to go
Sunday.
antiquing, I'll be happy to take her next year if I'm at San Diego and not in New Zealand for Worldcon.
Yes, of course. That's a bit of it. Yes, there's several. That weekend is a clash across the globe because there's also London Film Comic Con that weekend as well.
Wow.
It's a very busy weekend in that calendar. Is that the same for yourself when it came to spending conventions with Len? Or did you kind of like just go off and do your own things, or were there
No,
things that you came together?
you know, Comic-Con is always a business convention for us.
Sure.
When I was practicing law full-time, I had more clients than just Len who were there. So it's an opportunity to see folks and, you know, discuss projects and so forth. But we would do, I would go to his panels. I would go see what he was doing. And I would go to panels that I was interested in that I could still get into. And it's usually good for me to pick up 4.5 hours of minimum continuing legal education, which I do. I mean, back in the earlier days, I would be on the legal panels. You know, I would be a participant in that way. Not so much lately. And but in the evenings were all together because those were the publisher events that we would both go to. And, you know, always fun to see folks that we knew that lived in other part of the country, other part of the world, you know, and so forth.
When it came to participating in the panels, was it something that you actively sought out? Because obviously you had this wealth of experience, you had this this knowledge.
Right.
Was it something that people came to you, perhaps, or did you actively go? Oh, I'll go there.
Yeah, in the science fiction field, yes, because I was the lawyer for the Science Fiction Writers of America for 7 years, and I had been doing panels on various and sundry things before I met Len. So in the science fiction world, people sought me out. In Comic-Con, since I was not a known quantity to a lot of people there, you know, it takes a while to work your, you know, to work your way in, and then they forget about you. So.
And the other element, of course, which has developed and grown, well, I mean, it's been there from the start, but it's seriously exploded, is cosplay and the cosplayers. And you've got the experience as a photographer. Was that something that did you decide to block any time to go and do that, or was it just something that you managed to get to do while you were at conventions?
I haven't done any of that for years. I did do it. I mean, I remember going. My first Worldcon was NorrisCon 2, which is 1980. And I do remember going out of my way to getting press credentials, so I could in fact go backstage and do the costumes and everything for there. That wasn't, you know, I mean, ultimately that was not my interest in photographing the field. What I photographed were the authors and the artists and the publishers, and that was done as an exhibit that has traveled the world more than I have, with the World Science Fiction Convention. I mean, I know that it was in, I know that it went to the Netherlands. It may have gone to one of the British Isles conventions. I don't know, because it has traveled more than I have. But it did a number of conventions here in the States, and they did have it up at San Jose last year. So, but I'm more of a, what I did as a photographer, I like to describe as I did third-party portraits, whereas the client was not the subject. The client was a newspaper, a magazine, you know, and I didn't do carriage trade. People did not come to my little studio to sit and get their, you know, 4x5s, 8x10s. I worked for publication all of my life. And so that's what I wound up doing. I mean, there are other people who've done some very lovely stuff with cosplay. That too has exploded. But that was not my focus as a photographer.
All right. I thought perhaps you may have the camera to hand just to catch One
I
or two
always have a
memories.
camera to hand. You know, I always have a camera to hand, be it the one in my phone. I mean, I like to say my first photograph in the Washington Post was shot on a 25-year-old box, well, not box camera, but it was a 35 millimeter fixed focus lens, old Kodak Retina, and I had I had a camera to hand. There was a weather shot. I called the desk. My someone who had been an instructor of mine was on the desk. She said, "Bring it in." And my feeling about photography is the most important tool a photographer has is not the latest camera, it's what's in their brain and, how they see it. So yes, I always have a camera, and, camera in a phone these days is pretty darned amazing.
We had a frozen screen there for a second. I think we're okay. I'm just going to touch some wood there for a second. I think we're okay. Right, hang on a second. It's oh my word. Okay. Fair enough. Let's get rid of that. Right. Technically.
Oops. I've lost you.
Oh, dearie me. Bear with me. Am I there?
Yeah, you're back again.
Oh, my word. We were talking about this before we came on air, didn't we? I think. Hello?
Okay, I missed the question or what the reference is, and I'm still here, but I'm looking at your Talkin Con screen.
Yeah, I need to get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. Okay, no idea what happened there. That would be the gremlins, just kind of reminding us that they're there and that computers like to be in control. And that was probably Skynet coming online. Yeah, which is fair enough.
Harley is one.
We're all good. So I know that we were talking about when you met Len at a convention and you went to his panels, and that's great to have him attending these shows and having a great time meeting and interacting with fans. Do you have any favorite memories of Len at a convention? Not necessarily San Diego, but just across the board.
Wow.
I know. Where do you start and where do you stop?
Yeah, exactly. He was, he loved meeting his fans. He was very accessible. It was always a good time for him to be reminded that, people were affected by his work. Clearly a great night was the night he was inducted to the Eisner Hall of Fame. He was a little taken back by being nominated. And appropriately humbled by the whole experience. I just, and I'm glad that happened before he died, because I've been collecting awards for him since he died, and it's a lot harder on me than I thought it. Than you think it might be, because the first thought always is, you're 2 years too late with this, or 6 months too late with this. And I'm very glad to have it. And he would be delighted to have it. But it would have been nicer for him to have it when he was still around. There are so many thoughts about that. It was fun to be sitting up in the Warner Brothers loft in San Diego, the year that both Game of Thrones came on air and the second version of The Human Target came on air, because I could watch him signing autographs down below with the cast of Human Target, which he really enjoyed doing. That was a great group of people, so that was particularly fun for him. And then, of course, how can I forget the various meeting of Hugh Jackman at Comic-Con, particularly the first time Hugh jumped off the stage to come out to the audience to shake Len's hand. That was pretty damn terrific. I mean, all writers should be privileged enough to have an actor who is that grateful for a character, because I will tell you, it doesn't happen very often.
But this is true. I mean, also, it's been interesting talking to a number of creators that have some great fame, and they are well known within the industry, but they are also fans of comics themselves. And when they suddenly go fanboy, I think one of my favorite memories personally is, I believe I was stood next to Grant Morrison, at which point Stan Lee was walking by, and Grant just collapsed. He just kind of it just totally derailed him. And
Yeah.
was there any moments when Len kind of was wandering around, or just random moments which kind of took him aback?
Ah, God, I am sure there were, and they will probably come to me after we're off of this broadcast. But you know, we were in Australia in 2013 with Grant, his wife. This is terrible because the music is not my generation's music, but my Chemical Romance, the writer of, oh, this is awful, Umbrella Academy.
Yes.
Umbrella Academy. And who else was there with us? Dave, artist who worked with Neil Gaiman a lot.
That would be Dave McKean
and his wife and all. And that was, you know, that was a great deal of fun because Grant was appropriately obsequious to Len. And, you know, which I got a great kick out of. But, you know, Len had a big part in bringing a lot of the Brits over to the States to work. And I think that was one of the things that he really loved about being in the business for as long as he was, that he had a good eye for identifying talent, and he was very supportive of talent that came afterwards, some of which I think have not been quite as grateful as they should be. But, you know, I mean, I really appreciate it when people like Neil Gaiman talk about Len's contribution to the field, and how, and Chris Claremont, about how many people wouldn't have had work if not for, because so many people have built on what he started. And,
absolutely.
You know, he was really good at starting things, and then he'd get bored and go on to something else. And I think it was very lucky for him that he I mean, it was good for him that he got to go back to Swamp Thing at the end. If he could have gone back to Wolverine, I think he would have.
Sure.
So,
that's fine.
Yeah.
We've got a couple of questions that have come in on the chat, and I will be getting to those as well. But
Yeah.
thank you very much indeed to everyone who's got a couple in. Please do jump in and continue with those. I'll ask one more, and then I'll get a couple of those out of the way.
Okay.
When it comes to the way that the conventions have grown and exploded, and also changed a little bit of their focus away from comics, some people would feel that it's just gone too far in the other direction. And when you talk about comic conventions and Comic Cons, the comics are getting more and more marginalized. Is there any element of the convention experience for yourself which has changed for the worse, would you say?
Well, as I said, I can't get into panels I want to get into.
Sure.
You know, and that's pretty sad. But I mean, that's probably the worst. I mean, in terms of the media coming in, you cannot stop progress in that way. And most people get their comics now on television, I think, rather than any other particular way. Comics don't sell what they used to by any means whatsoever. I mean, you had the peak of comic sales, I think, actually was probably World War II, but everybody thinks of of what happened when the speculators got in around about the time Len and I got married, in the early 90s, when the death of Superman occurred and people bought 7 million copies of a comic book. I think if you actually look back on numbers, there were probably bigger sales during World War II of comic books. But I'd have to go to somebody like Paul Levitz, who actually knows that better than I do. You know, I don't, you know, people find their own conventions. My convention was always very different from Len's, and it was very different from my son, who went to his first Comic-Con when he was 10 years old. He is totally, as an adult now, but as a kid, he became interested in anime and gaming, and his convention is pretty much the anime and gaming convention. Len's was partially media because, of course, he wrote animation and he wrote live action, and he was very interested in what was being done with his characters in other media. And mine, I think, tended to be more on the business aspects of things, what was going on that way, and art, because I really love the art. So all of that is, kind of the way I look at it.
Is that usually your first place to head to when
Well,
you
it had
get
been
to
until
a
it
convention?
became so difficult to find. I am not entirely sure where the art show is at Comic-Con anymore. I know where it used to be, but those are now panel rooms. So, or it used to be at the far end when Comic-Con was only a fraction of one floor of the convention center. That is now only a fraction of the size of the entire convention now.
Yeah. It's something that I kind of railed against myself, because I'm a relative noob. I'll fully admit. 2010 was my first for San Diego, and the art show and the art gallery up in Sales was a great place to go and see firsthand some really amazing creative talents right there in front of you, and displaying their work. I believe now it is in a room in the Grand Hyatt, or the Manchester Grand, on a floor somewhere out of the way, and I think that's a crime. It really is. It really is.
That's why I can't find it.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you stay at the hotel that's at the other end of the convention center, it becomes like a Sherpa guide hike to get there. However, my niece is now working for Hyatt. I may be staying there the next time.
It's always handy to have someone on the inside. That's good enough. That's fair enough. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions. Into the Blue Mister, stepping away from the convention chat for a second. I love how different creators have different offices and studios. Could you ask Christine what Len's workspace was like? This is interesting, actually, because I was reading Joel Meadows' Masters of Comics, and I'm also interested in the different spaces and the way that artists approach their spaces. Either it's somewhere away from home, so there's a definite disconnect. There's work and there's home. What was Len's like?
Len's was, except for when he was working as an editor, always in the house. I think even when he was working as an editor, he did all of his writing at home. He was much more of a night owl or a vampire when we were first together, where he would work all night. And I believe that is how he generally tended to work, to write was at night. That changed. His work space, a colossal mess. Don't touch anything because I know where I put it. And if you move it, I will not be able to find it again. And it's like, how can you find anything in the first place? It's not there. I mean, I would show you what the room looks like, but it's a colossal mess that I still have not been able to deal with. There were, when we moved, we had a fire in 2009. And we were put out of the house for about a year, and we returned briefly and then bought the house I live in now. And the house, so he came in, he's like, that room's mine. It's like, okay, fine. So one of the bedrooms became his office in the corner. There were rules. Among the Len rules, he could come into my workspace, which for a while was also in the house, and start talking to me, whether I was doing a response brief for a lawsuit or whatever. He would just start talking. I would have to go and stand quietly in his doorway until he acknowledged me. before I was allowed to speak, because God forbid he would lose his train of thought on whatever he was writing. So there was a certain lack of equality there. But it was his space. It is filled with bound volumes, collected volumes of comics. It's filled with individual issues of comics that are stacked 3 feet high. Desk, computer. He was dragged kicking and screaming to the computer age in around 1985 or 86. We had a mixed marriage for many years. He used Mac, I used PC. When Mac was the way to go with photography, I became a hybrid. I worked both ways, but he worked Mac his entire life and would, sort of look askance at having to deal with anything with MS-DOS. So there was an L-shaped desk, computer on it, printer, but colossally messy.
Wow, excellent. I'm also fascinated by the fact that it's a space that you've not wanted to tackle yet. It's something that you're still feeling is very much his space.
Yeah, it's very hard. I mean, it's like, I keep looking at it, it's like behind that door is a guest bedroom. But I move my office stuff out of my bedroom, but it is very much his space. It's filled with action figures. It's filled with sideshow Wolverines and everything else that they did. Eventually it will have his awards in there rather than in my living room. But it's very hard. It's very hard because it is. I can imagine. So
okay. Also, I've got a couple of questions about the relationship you had with Len at conventions, and I kind of have to add this as well, because when myself and Caroline go, especially as I've started to do more panel hosting and I've become more involved in the actual conventions itself, Caroline's kind of evolved into being a little bit of a PA for me, which is not something I'm overly happy about. Yeah. But it's something that did happen. Is that something that kind of happened with you and Len, or was it a case of no, you sort your own convention out?
Well, no. I mean, I would consider myself. I mean, besides being his lawyer, I would consider myself more to be more of his his PR person, which I actually do for a number of my friends. I felt my job was mostly to watch his back. And when he became very ill, a little bit more, but actually my son took over more of that aspect of things. His last few conventions, Michael was really there as his, the person who watched out for him, make sure he got to where he needed to go, make sure he was keeping his schedule, and he did a very good job of it, as I will say.
Sure. As the years have gone since Len's passing, you are still going to conventions. You're still wanting to go and see these amazing things at shows, but obviously there is a lot of people that are quite understandably wanting to talk about Len and about his influence on the industry and on comics. How difficult is it to go to a convention nowadays for yourself? Is it something that you take a lot of joy in, or is it a little bit difficult?
Yeah, San Diego's a little bit difficult, but yeah, time passes and things get get a little bit easier to deal with. But no, I mean, I don't. We used to go to a lot of conventions.
Sure.
We would do San Diego. We would do World Fantasy. We would do WonderCon and WorldCon for sure every year. And I did World Fantasy this year because it was down near LAX. So I actually did go. I hadn't gone in a number of years. And at the science fiction and fantasy conventions, I actually have more of a separate identity. I mean, obviously, everybody who's anybody in the field knows about, my marriage and everything. But because I was established there before we were together, it's a different dynamic.
Sure.
At Comic-Con, I am always going to be wife of.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. You know, that was, as Len would say, you knew the job was dangerous when you took it. And I would say, I didn't know how dangerous it was. No, you know, you kind of covered a lot of that up. But you know, I enjoy going. If anybody, you know, if I'm invited, I go. I would be, you know, more than happy to go. We were sorry that Len had been discussing coming to London for a convention about the time he got hit with the heart attack. And after that, traveling that far just was out of the question.
Well, that was going to be a question I was going to ask as well, about traveling further afield, because obviously the industry and its worldwide appeal, it allows you to have those opportunities to go to conventions outside of the US and kind of explore and find interesting places around the world. Is there any highlights and memories of you and Len going off to further afield?
Well, the only time I went with him to way further afield, I mean, we went to Canada, but Canada hardly counts. We went to Australia. He was invited to be part of this symposium that takes place at the Sydney Opera House.
Yeah.
And this was before the heart attack, but after he was on dialysis, and they were good enough to make arrangements for him to go to dialysis while he was there. They took on all of that. It worked out quite well, and we had a wonderful, wonderful time, although we did not get far afield from Sydney. I am envious that Chris Claremont is in Greece right now, and he's been to Italy a couple of times, and I would have loved to have had Len get those invitations when he was around to enjoy them. He did get an invitation to India, but it was after dialysis had kicked in, so there was no way he was going to be able to do that. And as I said, he had been in negotiations about going to London, but that wound up not happening. He had been to Europe a number of times before we were married, and I think the last time he was there was when he was working for Disney, so just before we were married.
Fair enough. Well, I mean,
I hate to fly, by the way.
Sorry?
I said I hate to fly. I will fly.
Well,
I hate
that I can understand. I think it was Terry Dodson who came over for Thought Bubble a couple of weeks ago, and I went up to him and I went, just out of curiosity, are you here because I suggested it to you about 3 years ago? Because he was asking about UK conventions, and obviously it's Terry and Rachel. You feel that there's this combined package, and he went, yeah, getting her on a plane. That was not going to happen. And I totally get that. I totally understand.
You said you were going to ask me about Jeopardy.
I was going to ask you about Jeopardy. It was going to be something I was going to kind of wrap up on, because, I mean, people know of you as a photographer. They know about your work with the legal field as well. But 4-time Jeopardy champion?
Yep.
Fantastic. Yep. Tell us a little bit about that experience.
Well, it ultimately meant that I was on a show 6 times, because you win 4 times, then you lose. And then you know, if you win 4 times, you are likely to come back for the Tournament of Champions, which I did. And it was a blast. It was something I'd wanted to do since I was a kid. I tried out for the show. The first time when I was in college, when it was still in New York. Tried out for the show again soon after I moved to Los Angeles. That day, nobody made it through the initial round. It was a really bad day. And then they put the test online, and I passed and was interviewed the first time. And they called me to be on the show, and then told me I couldn't be on the show because I had a friend who was working for a special effects company that was working on Spider-Man. And they thought that was a conflict, and let them know. And they wanted me to let them know when she was no longer working for them. So time goes by. I took it the next time online. That time it took 11 months for them to call me up. My friend was no longer working on Spider-Man, and I made it on the show that time. I mean, I was a good demographic for them. I'm an older white woman. Well, an older woman. I don't think they care about my color. But you know, they've got a lot of white guys who go on that show. So anything that breaks up the dynamic is really something they are looking for. So I did well. I made some really good friends. My group from the Tournament of Champions was just a great group of people, and a number of us are still in touch, mostly through Facebook. But Colonel Dave Belote, who was a 6-time champion, I think, my year, was running for I want to say the Senate or in Virginia. I was going to hold him a fundraiser before he dropped out because of a family matter. But it's very interesting folks that you meet on Jeopardy. A lot of people, it was very interesting. There was sort of this blowback in the comics field about how I didn't mention Len, or how I didn't mention, was I ashamed of comics? And it's like going, Jeopardy was about me, not about Len.
Yeah.
And he was very cool with that. I mean, I called him in a panic the morning that I went into tape, because he and Michael came in later, and I had spent the night at a friend's house nearby the studio. And I said, will you be upset if I don't win any money? And he goes, there's money involved? It's like, okay, cool. So, it was one of those things. Jeopardy was a religion in our house. There was one of the things that we bonded over. And the last time he flew to London, in fact, stuck in LAX. I was in law school in Cleveland, and I relayed an entire episode of Jeopardy to him, which was on television here, so he could, and I think that, this is before I don't think we had cell phones. So he must have been on a payphone at the airport, feeding it while I was reading him clues for Jeopardy. It was pretty funny.
Wow.
So, yeah.
What was the experience like? Because, like you say, I mean, 4-time champion. I mean, when you started getting episode to episode, I mean, what was that experience like? I mean, how well did you feel you were going to be doing?
You never know, and they can open up open up the board, and you go, I don't know what any of those categories are. I've never heard of any of those words before. I had been, because I lived locally, they asked me to come in to be a potential alternate. So I'd actually been on the stage already. I'd spent a day there, and had, worked with the buzzer and all before I went on to the time that I was actually going to be on. And because I had done that, they put me on the first show that shoots. They shoot 5 shows a day.
Sure.
Or they did. I understand they're doing 3 and 2 now because Alex is so ill. But you shoot 5 episodes. You have no idea how exhausted you are by the time lunch rolls around, when they've done 3 episodes already. And then by episode 4, you're going, just kill me now.
Oh, God.
Please don't make me do this. My contact lenses, which at the time I wear contacts. Now I have bionic eyes. They're glued to my eyes, and it's like I can't read the board anymore. It was, by that 5th game, it was pretty awful. And I came in second on my last game because of betting properly, and I'm so angry at having lost that game, because my friend Bob Harris, who has been on the show many times, he was 5-time champion back in the days when you were limited to 5 games, and he's written about it, and I highly recommend the book. It's very entertaining, called Prisoner of Trebekistan. And in it, he has a chapter, I think the chapter refers to Millard Effin Fillmore. And I got 12 presidents in, and I didn't think I was going to get to my answer. And I started from most recent presidents going back, missing by 1 president, Miller Effin Fillmore, which was the answer. And it's like, you wake up at night in cold sweats because you've done this stupid thing. Nobody else got it, by the way. It was a matter of having gone into Final Jeopardy not in the lead that blew me away. And, U.S. presidents, I thought, was one of my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And it blew me twice. So that, and in the Tournament of Champions. Anyway, it was an experience I love. Maggie Speak and all the people who work in the contestant wrangling are wonderful people, and I loved the experience of being there.
Do you get the a different experience watching Jeopardy, or did you get a different experience watching Jeopardy once you'd been on the show? Because you'd obviously got to see how the sausage was made, as it were. And like you say, there's also that feeling as well that, like you say, you doing all of those shows back to back, watching an episode of Jeopardy, you're focusing on that one episode, and yes, it's a lot of mental arithmetic and a lot of gymnastics, but doing, like you say, filming that many episodes back to back and feeling completely drained. Do you watch the show slightly different now?
I always
Now
think
you've been on it.
probably. I mean, a lot of people I know who have been on the show don't feel obligated to watch it anymore. I don't want to watch it anymore, depending on how they did on the show. I still watch it. It's like I'm very proud. I'm like all caught up. I'm ready to go on Monday when it's, because the year that Len died, it backed up for months because it was something we did together every night. And the other thing, this will choke me up. He was in the Final Jeopardy answer 2 weeks after we buried him.
Yeah.
The episode had been filmed in the spring because they were worried about a writer's strike, and so it was already Do a close up on me crying.
No.
And anyway, but he was part of the Alex said his name and he pronounced it correctly. Good for him. And then, later in the year, I think there was another question that was directly related to Len about Wolverine.
Sure.
And they didn't get it. But, that would have been the biggest thrill for him to sit and watch that.
I think I remember when social media found out about it, because I think the line basically was, how did you get that wrong?
Exactly.
How did you get that wrong?
Well, my question is how could I be on there and the category was Hughes we love and none of them was Hugh Jackman?
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Listen, Christine, I want to say thank you very much indeed for coming on and talking to us about conventions, about Jeopardy, and of course talking about Len as well. I'm certain that I'm hoping that we'll see you at a convention talking about Len again, because I know that we had that wonderful tribute panel 2 years ago, but I'm hoping that those panels continue, because I think creators that have left us really should be remembered and celebrated at these shows, as well as new upcoming talent. So, I mean, legacy creators are where we learn these stories and learn these heroes, and Len is definitely one of those.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you very
Christine,
much.
Thank you so much indeed for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And once again, happy Thanksgiving.
Thank
you. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Happy holidays to you.
Happy holidays.
Never.
Take care. Wow. That was fun. That was Christine Valada. And just so much fun to talk to her about Len. And also about her convention experience. I really wanted to talk about her own perceptions of conventions, and that's what we got out of that conversation. I really enjoyed talking to her. Thank you very much indeed to Christine for coming on. Right, great guest, and we have another one on the way. But first things first, just to quickly say once again, everyone who has been supporting us on Patreon, thank you so much indeed for your continued support. We've been trying to put up as much as we possibly can, especially from Thought Bubble and also Geek Girl Con as well. We do have some other convention coverage, which Dan Berry and the rest of the convention collective people have been putting together. We're going to hopefully get those up in the next 7 days, and also we're going to get a couple of surprises on the site in about over the course of the next 7 days as well. So if you'd like to support us, patreon.com/Englishman SDCC. Of course, every penny does go into the running of the site and helping us do what we do. So please help us by supporting as much as you possibly can. Thank you. Right, we have ourselves another special guest who is joining us. This boy has been a very busy chap. Considering it looks like he's also been decorating. He's got himself his Christmas decorations up already. Is that... Hello there. Oh, bit of a...
Merry Christmas.
Okay.
I know. Sorry, let me get rid of it.
You know what? No. Put the hat back on. I'm not the only person wearing a hat. Deal with it. Listen, Mark, hello there, sir. How are you?
Yes, I'm very good, thanks. Yes.
You have been a busy chap. You've been running around the capital chasing after a gentleman.
That sounds like I'm some sort of stalker. It's weird. No, nothing like that. But no, look, as we know, I'm a big fan of Kevin Smith anyway. So anytime he comes to the UK, which is not that often anymore, unfortunately, I will go and see what he's got to offer. And he's now doing this Jay and Silent Bob Roadshow. Jay and Silent Bob Reboot Roadshow. And he was here in the UK for the past couple of days. So I was lucky enough to be in attendance for one of the screenings and one of the Q&As.
Okay. I mean, I know that he's been doing his best kind of, when he does come to the UK, he tries to leave the M25 at least once, but he's been very much on a really strict kind of promotional calendar, because every single time I turned on Twitter or turned on social media, he was just everywhere. He was he was absolutely putting the mileage in when it comes to as many people as he could talk to, which kind of does make you wonder how much energy he's got for the actual screening. What was your Q&A like?
Well, mine was the first of the day.
Wow, okay, excellent.
Yeah, so mine was, it started at 5 and he came, did 10 minutes intro, then the film, which is just over an hour, just under an hour and a half. And then he did a Q&A for maybe about 50 minutes, but they had to stop by 8 o'clock because they had another screening at 20 past 8, which then that one had to finish by midnight because he had another one at midnight, which then had to finish by 4 a.m. because they were kicking them out at 10 past 4.
Good Lord.
And then he was going back onto one of the big radio stations in the UK at 7:30 the next day, 7:30 a.m. the next day.
This is what I mean. I mean, yeah, that's grueling. But the thing is, this is not something that he's just kicking off either. He's been running this tour, certainly in the US, for about a month and a half, 2 months now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's slowly coming towards its end now because the film's already out in the US and it came out here in the UK Friday, actually. And then it's hitting DVD in January, I know here, not sure about the US. But yeah, he's been really pushing this. But he was saying at the Q&A, look, you know, the financiers were, he was saying to the financiers, look, if I take this film out on the road, people will turn up. Give me that opportunity. Let me go out and promote this myself, because, you know, people turned up for all of the Q&As, just the Q&As of him and Jason Mewes. If you're showing a film which is him and Jason Mewes being rebooted and having all of the old people back from those classic films, people are going to turn up. And he was right. I mean, those tickets, as I said, 3 showings in one day, all of those tickets went within 20 minutes. It was chaos, absolute chaos trying to get tickets. So then they had to put on 2 screenings on the Friday at another cinema in London. He'd already done 1 in London on the Wednesday as well. He may have gone up to Manchester. I'm not too sure. But yeah, as you said, Leonard, on a very strict timeline of how to promote it. But you know what? As you said, he seemed to be everywhere and he seemed to do a damn good job.
What was the highlights to your Q&A?
Do you know what? There was a few, actually. Somebody had asked him if he was to remake, if Jay and Silent Bob were British, who would he choose to play them? Now, he was really stuck, but he chose Russell Brand for Jason Mewes, and somebody shouted out Ricky Gervais for Silent Bob, which is actually a really good idea. The other thing
I prefer the idea of Ricky Gervais and Russell Brand.
Yeah, I mean, it's really good, but as he said, Ricky Gervais wouldn't shut up, so that doesn't work. He needs somebody else. The other thing that came out of it, and I found this quite interesting, was he was in the film, and I don't want to spoil this for anybody, actually, but unfortunately, Mark Hamill is not in this film. He's tried to bring loads of his old friends back from all of the previous films, but Mark Hamill is not in it for a very good reason, which is the Empire told him no, he can't be in the film. And you can't go against the Empire. So that's why he's not in the film. However, Kevin was saying that he's going to be working again, something they've got going together. Him and Mark are working together. And it was only afterwards I thought, hang on a second. Kevin Smith's doing this He-Man reboot. Are we going to have Mark Hamill doing the voice of somebody in He-Man? I think he'd be great for Skeletor. I think he'd be great.
That would be a nice, certainly an evolution from his Joker representation as well. That kind of very manic, high-pitched take on it. That'd be rather cool.
Yeah, yeah. But as I said, you know what he's like. He likes to talk. So there wasn't that many questions. He did more questions than I thought he was going to do, to be honest. But you know, anytime he's going to talk, he will talk and talk and talk. And you could see his PR person come on, wrap it up. We've got more questions, you know. And the good thing was actually, because this is backed by Legion M, who obviously have been on the show before with yourself, Leonard. And if you are a member of Legion M, if you were there and you asked a question, you got a lovely lanyard, which they use in the film when they go to Chronic Con. I've got to pronounce that right. So you get the lanyard and you get the little thing as well. So if you asked a question, you got one of those. So, I mean, you know, that's nice enough as it is. And then you get access to screenings and whatever else. But yes, so he was talking about financing and all of these different things, which he talks about. You know, he's very open about these things.
What was the kind of demographic of the show? I mean, certainly the Q&A, because, I mean, you say he's talking about the financing of the whole thing. That sounds a little kind of dry and clean cut, or was there a little bit more light and levity to the proceedings?
No, it was very light. Come on, you know what he's like. He could read the phone book and it would still be interesting. This is the thing. And the demographic very much was middle-aged men. You know, I mean, there wasn't many outside of that, to be honest with you. But it was very much people who grew up with his films in the 90s, you know, the before nerd culture had really hit, and now obviously they classify themselves as nerds. This is the demographic for him. He knows his demographic, and this is what he's playing to. And as I said before, he's getting the seats, he's getting the bums on seats, because he's going out and saying, let me go out, let me sell it to my people, and those are his people. And they turn up for everything. Listen, I'm one of them. I turn up for anything. If he's here, I'll happily go and listen to him talk for 3 hours. But yeah, the demographic, I was... When you go to, because I went to the Prince Charles Cinema to see it, you can't queue / line up inside. You have to queue outside, round the corner, down through Chinatown. So we got there about half an hour before it was due to start. And yeah, there was probably already about 200 people in the queue. I mean, it's assigned seating and there's only 300 people. But as you walk down the queue, you're like, yep, kind of guessed it would be all of these people. Like, nobody stood out where you're like, really? This person? Kevin Smith? Come on. But no, it was all the people you would expect. That's the great thing about it.
Fair enough. And I think we'll just wrap up with, if you can, without spoiling too much, your thoughts on the actual film. You've got the chance to see it. I mean, it's getting a couple of limited screenings here in the UK. It's gotten itself its limited screenings in the US as well. But yeah, for those people who are maybe on the fence about going to go see it, can you give them a review, please?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you're only going to go and see this film if you've seen most of Kevin Smith's films before. You can't go having not seen any of his films. You can't go having seen only 2. So this film is very much a love letter by Kevin Smith to Kevin Smith, which I'm fine with, because that's all it is. But it shows that him slowly getting back into the View Askew universe. You know, that's the thing. So getting back into Clerks and Chasing Amy and everything else like that. For me, I absolutely loved it. But as I said, I'm the target demographic. I love all of his films. I think Clerks is absolutely his greatest film ever. But you'll go in and it is very fun on several levels, because the cameos are off the charts, like ridiculously off the charts, and they're very funny. And the writing for these cameos is brilliant, like really witty stuff, like very, very clever. I like that. But I like the fact that it uses the convention scene as well. Like towards the end, they have to go to, as I said, Chronic Con. And there's lots of things going on there where you're like, yeah, that totally happens at a comic convention. You know, he's writing from experience. And then there is this kind of metaphysical point to it, like an angle to it, where it sort of is talking from the first and third person angle, which is weird to say, but it works in the film. And at some point, it even goes to like the fourth person, which is bonkers, but it works. For me, it works all the way through. And also, I got to say that Kevin Smith's daughter is one of the leads, and she's great in it. She's absolutely fantastic, actually.
So what you're trying to say to me is that if you enjoyed Tusk as much as I did, I'm going to love this film.
Did you see Yoga Hosers?
No, I haven't. Okay,
Right.
I'll admit that.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. Tusk is a acquired taste. I mean, he did bring it up in the Q&A. I have to say. No, if you like Kevin's original work, you know, Mallrats and Clerks and things like that, yes, you'll love this. Tusk. If you love Tusk, maybe we need to talk about that a little bit.
Is this right? Are you okay? Are you going to start staging an intervention for me?
No. Listen, I'm okay with Tusk. It's fine if you know that it is a little bit weird and a little bit out there. But this is not that, you know, if you love Tusk, this is not the film for you. Let me tell you, this is much more, as I said, a love letter to the original Kevin Smith View Askew universe by the director.
Fair enough. A couple of comments that have come in on the chat already, especially when it comes to the way that he has been promoting the show. Michael P., you're going to be surprised by this. He's actually referencing The Expanse. Michael P. is letting us know that Kevin did a very special Expanse trailer. Also saying, let's see down here, that the trailer was so good. What else have we got? Dan Berry saying Legion M. I know those guys. Yes, indeed. So do I. They are awesome. Regular folk can invest in movies. Well worth checking out the Legion M page if you get the chance. Into the Blue Mister. Skeletor Joker. I am not nice. No, yeah. Good reference. I like that one. Well done. So there we go. And last but not least, we do have Kevin Smith's finest hour is the first 10 minutes of Chasing Amy. This is where we may have to hold Mark back.
No, Chasing Amy is actually from the viewpoint of somebody who goes to conventions, and before it was, you know, before the nerd word and being cool to be nerd, Chasing Amy told it how it was. And if you go back and watch that film, there is a lot of interesting things talked about in that, about, you know, coming of age, dealing with sexuality, dealing with finding your place in the world. I actually think Chasing Amy is a better film now than it was when it came out. But, you know, those first 10 minutes are absolutely cracking. I will say that. But the whole film, to me, I watched it last year and I'm like, this is a million times better than what I remember it being.
I agree with that. And very nicely put, indeed. And also, Danbury, what's a Nubian? Of course, it had to be finished. I think that's the way we can finish on that. Excellent stuff. Listen, thank you very much indeed for coming on and talking about that. I'm looking forward to checking out the film when it comes out, no doubt, on a streaming service at some point in 2020. But for now, for getting people to go and see the film and to actually have that interaction and meeting people, it's almost like hand delivering the film to them. And I think that's it hasn't been done to this scale before. And I love the fact as well that he is saying that every single time that he's showing this film, he's actually in the room as well. He must have seen it so many times now, but he's just getting off on the whole adulation and the responses of the audience. And you can't say fairer than that. That's a real positive thing and an attitude for a director to have. So that's really cool.
Absolutely. And actually, interesting you say that. What they've been doing secretly is filming at the back of the cinema when certain cameos turn up, and then sending that footage to that actor, just to show how much they're still loved.
Nice. Excellent stuff. Listen, thank you very much indeed for coming on, mate. Looking forward to getting you back on again. Are we going to be seeing you again before Christmas?
If you'll have me, you know.
Always.
If you think I've got enough words to say, then why not?
Always. It'd be good to have a kind of wrapping up of the year as well, perhaps. Do kind of a closure of 2020. So that'd be rather cool. Mark, thank you very much indeed for coming on, mate.
No problem. Anytime.
Anytime. Brilliant. Thank you. So there you go. Mark Serby talking about Kevin Smith and Kevin Smith, should I say, Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, which you can find out more about at Jay and Silent Bob Reboot.co.uk. I know there's a UK version of the site. There's still 1 or 2 screenings happening here in the UK. Still plenty more touring to do in the US as well. Off the back of he's gone back to the US now, and he's back to doing some more promotion for the film over there. And that's us. Thank you very much indeed to Christine. Thank you very much indeed to to Mark for joining us. We do have some great guests coming up over the course of the next couple of weeks. We do have a show that's going to be taking place next week and the week after. We are going to have to take a break the week after that because as a working DJ, unfortunately, Christmas is now here. The festive season is happening, and it does mean that I do have 1 or 2 jobs which I have to do on a Sunday, and that third weekend in December is one of them. But we are going to be back for 2 more shows as we close the year down. Christmas one, just to wrap things up. We have a special guest lined up for that, which I'm sure you're going to be excited about when I announce it next week. And then we're going to have our close of the year show before the new year. And that's us. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Once again, back again next week, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. GMT. Hope you've enjoyed the show. And if you have, spread the love, spread it around. Let everyone know that we are here each and every Sunday, Talkin Con with myself, Leonard Sultana. From me to you. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Take care.